what am I doing here, right? I mean, look at that list. It's incredible, isn't it? You have men like Abraham and Isaac. You have people like Moses and David. And then you have me. Those are people you could have a faith that looks up to. Not like me. I'm different from everybody else on that list. I'm a woman. Okay, so I guess there is Sarah on that list too. But Sarah and I are totally different. I don't mean that as an insult. Sarah's a really nice lady. She's a little opinionated about the way things are supposed to go, but she's a really nice lady. It's just, she's the mother of a nation, right? One of God's chosen people, and I'm me. Not only am I a woman, I'm a Gentile. That's the Jewish word for a non-Jew. And then there was my job. Let's just say I didn't always earn my money in the most proper way. So I get it. I know why you don't understand why I'm on that list. I don't understand why I'm on that list, but I was hoping maybe you could help me. Maybe if I tell my story to you, you can help me understand. So my story starts in Jericho. Jericho was a small city. It was about 2,000 people. And when I say small, I mean small. Our whole city was less than a half a mile wide. 2,000 people in that kind of a small area. We were literally living on top of one another. And so they decided to put the homes in the walls of the city. We had 2 walls that surrounded the city, and so they put the houses in between. I mean, we were literally living on top of one another. Not a lot of places for people to stay if you were coming in from out of town. So I decided I would make an honorable living, too, and I would have an inn. I loved being an innkeeper. That was how I started hearing those stories, the stories about the Hebrew people. Man, it was incredible. Did you know that God, He brought them out of Egypt, and they wandered in the desert for 40 years, and He fed them, and He took care of them? Those were some of the stories I heard. He actually parted the Red Seas for them. That's amazing. And then there was the Amorites. They live not far from us. They're a lot like us. And their God, the Hebrew God, He had them win a battle. Man, this God, He's not like anybody I'd ever experienced before. You guys don't worship like we worshiped. There are all sorts of gods, and most of the time, they were a national god. It means that you were a god over a small region. Your power didn't extend much past that. So just because you were a god in Egypt didn't mean that you were a god in the desert or a god in Canaan. And that's what was crazy about this Hebrew God. He could do things in Egypt. And He had just as much power in the desert, power over the weather, over animals. None of us had ever heard anything like that before. It was incredible. So I started wondering, how far did that God's power go? How much did it include? Could it include Jericho too? I was really curious, but I wasn't going to tell anybody. A girl like me, you got to keep your head down and just do your job. But I was so curious. Not long after I started hearing stories, 3 men came and they stayed at my inn. I did what a normal innkeeper does. I eavesdropped. Now don't get me wrong. I mean, they made it really easy. They were just sitting around the table talking. It's not like they were trying to be private about it at all. They were talking about our city's defenses. If they thought maybe we would be ready for someone to attack. What the water supply was like, the food supply. Well, it didn't take me long to figure out who they were and what they were doing there. I had Hebrew spies in my inn. So I kept my head down, and I just went about my work and listened. About dusk or so, there was a knock on the door, and a soldier announced himself on the other side. Well, I looked at them, and they looked at me, and I looked at them, and I knew that they knew that I knew. You know what I mean. We all knew. And without thinking, I told him to come with me, and I ran upstairs. You see, we make our own linen. So I had to soak flax and dry it out, and oh my gosh, does it stink. I knew no soldier was going to take the time to go looking around with such an awful smell. I mean, I felt bad for the guys, but it was the safest place in my house. As soon as they were hidden, I ran back down the stairs, and as I ran, I couldn't believe what I had just done. Here I hid these men who were going to attack my home, and I didn't feel guilty about it. In fact, I decided I was going to lie to the men at the door. It's a little white lie, it doesn't really count. I told them that the men had been in my house. They had stayed there, but that they left at about dusk, right before the gates were going to close. I told them if they could hurry, I bet they would catch up with them. Well, of course, the soldiers listened. I imagine you wonder why men like that would come and stay with me. Made sense to me. No one would question them being in my house, why they'd be there. And they wouldn't question whether or not I would have loyalty to any kind of a ruler. Apparently, the soldiers didn't question it either. So they went, and I went back in the house, and I looked out the window and watched as they drove towards the fjords. That's the shallow part of the Jordan. It would be the place that the spies probably would have gone back through. And as soon as the coast was clear, I went back up to the roof, and I found the men hiding. They thanked me, and we decided it would probably be best for them to stay hidden overnight in case the soldiers came back. I did feel sorry for them. They were going to need a pretty good bath the next day. I went downstairs, and all night I thought about it, about this God of theirs. Early in the morning, before the gates even opened, I woke the men up, and they tied a red cord out my window. And before they went down, I stopped them. I told them what I had heard about their God. I told them that we were scared. But I also told them that I knew that their God was powerful. And I asked them for a favor. I asked them if maybe, since I had saved their lives, if they would save my family and me. And they agreed. They promised me that if I kept that red cord tied, that when they came back, we would be safe. And so they left. Not long after, the Hebrew people came, and they did attack. Attack's a harsh word. Well, that's a story for another time. Let's just say that the walls came down. And when the walls came down, my family was safe. And those Hebrew people, they welcomed me in as one of their own. And I started to travel with them. That's how I met my husband, Solomon. And I worshiped that Hebrew God. I worshiped him because I knew what he could do. I knew who he was, and I knew that he had saved me. It was incredible. Maybe that's the point, isn't it? Maybe the point is that I believed. I believed before I could see, but I believed even more afterwards. And God took my belief. I wasn't perfect. Not even one of God's chosen people. I shouldn't have been, but I was. I was brought in as one of his own. So much so, I became a mom, a grandma, and a great-grandma. In fact, you might have heard of my great-great-great-grandson. His name's David. He became a king. My grandson. A Gentile. Do you think maybe that's why? That's why my story gets included with everybody else's? Is because I'm different. Do you ever feel different? Do you ever feel like your faith shouldn't be good enough because you're different? Maybe like me, you've made some bad choices. Maybe like me, you don't feel like you fit in. Maybe you're told you don't fit in. But you believe. And God uses that belief, and you can't believe the ways that He can. God can use your belief no matter who you are, no matter what you do. He can use you. That's the power of faith.